Hello everyone. Oh look, not going to be able to see me in this, are you, with the sun going through past the trees? Anyway, hello. A few weeks ago I did a film about the RS100, which is my latest dinghy acquisition, telling you a bit about it. And in the comments, one of the people wrote saying, great boat's 300, well, lots of people liked it, but one of the boats said, great boat's 300, but what I actually bought was an RS100, because I fancied the idea of the spinnaker. To which I replied, funny you should mention the RS100, because I'm the guy that conceived it and had a role in its design and development. To which he replied, that sounds like an interesting story, you should make a film about that. And then several other people replied, yes, you should make a film about that. So, for all you dinghy people out there, while I drive to work for the rest of this week, because you'll probably find me wearing different shirts and stuff, I thought I'd run over my side of the story of the development of the RS100. Right, so we'll start at the beginning. For those of you who don't know, RS, Racing Sailboats, UK dinghy manufacturer, probably now one of the biggest racing dinghy manufacturers in the world. Make a whole range of boats. Not all, it used to be all targeted racing, but they do a fair amount now of more cruising and family friendly or beach type boats. But anyway, just a dinghy manufacturer. And the 100 is a single-handed boat, not a trapeze boat or anything, but just a normal single-handed hiking boat with a spinnaker. So how did I come to be involved? Well, back in like 2006, 2007, those of you that know me know that I don't stick to one thing for long. I like to try different boats and different types of sailing. And I was going through a succession of boats, not looking necessarily for the perfect boat, but looking for the perfect boat for me for our river, which is a tidal river estuary, the Medway. I'd just gone through my, I just had not long had my, what was my second blaze. I always keep coming back to a blaze because it is, as it happens, close to being the perfect boat for me on our river. But I just had 587, I think it was, blaze. At the time, Hannah and I both had a Europe as well, which again is a small single-handed boat. One of the few boats that A, Hannah and I can both sail, but B, Hannah and I both like sailing. They're great little boats, really responsive and fun, but not actually that quick in the scheme of quick boats. And on a tidal river in light winds, it could be a bit of a slog. So, that's why that one got scrubbed off the list. I'd had a canoe, an international canoe, which has a sliding seat and is fantastically quick against the tide. Fabulous boats, and at some point I'll get another canoe, but they don't have a spinnaker, and downwind it can be a bit boring. So I'm thinking what I really want is a boat with a spinnaker to liven up the downwind. Hannah and I got married, and as part of our honeymoon we went to Minorca sailing, obviously in Minorca, but they specialise in it's a dinghy sailing holiday, lots of different types of dinghy, aimed more at racing than just fun. They're not just beach boats, they're proper racing dinghies. And while I was out there, one of the boats I tried was a Musto skiff. Now, Musto skiff is a fabulous boat. As good a dinghy as you'll ever get, except very difficult to sail. If you're not very talented, or if you don't sail a lot, so you can develop the routines and get into the practices of how to do the different manoeuvres, it will just throw you in the water. And it does that. And to be honest, it doesn't matter how good you are, it will throw you in the water. But it is fabulous, but it's hard work. So, but the things I'd learnt now up to this point were that what I really wanted was an easy to sail boat that I could then sail in any weather and not have to worry about keeping fit or practiced or what the weather conditions were. But it really wanted to have a spinnaker. And that got me thinking again, back at Minorca sailing, the most popular boat to borrow at that time was an RS Vario. Ironically RS, given where this project went, but now the RS Vario is just that. It's a single-handed boat with a spinnaker, hiking boat, except it was never really designed as a racing dinghy. It was more of a holiday centre, beach type boat, and it had a sort of a niche following in the UK, but never really took off big time. had various drawbacks. And it seemed ironic to me that the boat that wasn't particularly liked from the racing fraternity, when you go on a holiday full of racing boats, the one boat they want to sail is that boat. Which made me realise that actually, that's the market, that's the boat we should be building. Now I kind of sat on this for I don't know how long really, but like you do, because I was thinking I really should make this myself. But at the time, Hannah and I had not long been married. As it happened, Hannah was pregnant. Lots of reasons not to get involved in designing one. But I finally decided, don't remember in the course of all of this when it was, but I should build this boat. So I started kind of crunching some numbers on to try and get a sense of what that boat would look like. Analysing the boats that I liked. So what was it about a blaze I liked? Its size, its weight, its sail area, the amount of leverage it's got, its width, ideal crew weights, trying to factor that into it so we could arrive at something. And I had this idea in my head, again, if you're not in the UK or familiar with the boat, you won't know, but RS, keep referring back to RS, which, like I say, at the time, this was never going to be the RS100, this was just my baby. But it seems ironic. But anyway, the target I decided at was RS make a boat called a 200. 200 is a two-person hiking boat with an asymmetric spinnaker, but built for a normal sized person. You don't have to be big and fit to sail one. It's not particularly difficult to sail. There's nothing really complicated about it. It's not even, in the world of dinghies, especially fast. I mean, it's not slow, but it's not especially quick. But it does give you a sense of speed, and it gives you some options when you're sailing it. And I'm thinking that's what the RS200 is extremely popular. It's probably one of the most successful two-person classes to come out in the last 20 years. Boats tend to follow the traditional boats that have been around forever, and new boats kind of have fads and come and go, but the RS200 came about and it's just getting stronger and stronger because it's a good boat. So I'm thinking that's what the world needs, a single-handed RS200. Not too extreme, but fun and fast enough to give the user a lot of pleasure. Now, I design pumps for a living at the moment. I like to think of myself as a designer, but boat designs a very specialist subject. There's a lot more to boat design than just making things fit together. So I'm thinking I'm going to need some help for this. Now, as it happened, when I kind of taught myself to sail, I learnt at Chipstead Sailing Club in Kent near Sevenoaks. Actually, is it in Kent? I don't know. Anyway, it's near Kent. And one of them, and I learnt to sail in a Firefly, which is a very old traditional two-person dinghy. It was a dinghy chosen, I think, if I'm getting this right, to be the single-handed class at the 1948 Olympics. That's how long ago it goes. But Chipstead likes its traditional boats, and we used to sail them single-handed, even though it's a two-person boat at Chipstead. And one of the people that used to sail there is a guy called Paul Handley, who obviously I got to know because we're sailing the same boat. But Paul's a really nice guy, really passionate about his sailing, but what's pertinent to this story is he's also a naval architect. He designs boats for a living. And more than that, he designed a couple of boats that I really felt were the sort of thing I was going for in a roundabout way for this. In that he designed what, as again now, wasn't at the time, but became the RS Fever and the RS Terror, because RS took over the design, seeing how good they were. Both of them are rotor moulded boats, which I wasn't interested in, but both of them weren't designed to be extreme sailing boats, and at the same time they weren't just designed to be cruising boats. They were targeted at in this instance at children, at smaller people, but very to give you a sense of fun and excitement that comes through a racing boat, but it's something that's not too extreme, which is exactly what I really had in mind for what turned out to be the RS100. So I contacted Paul, who's a really nice guy, as I've said, and explained it to him, and he was open to the idea of designing a boat with me. But at the time he's a little sceptical, probably about how serious I was, but also about how much did the market need another single-handed boat. I mean, the list of single-handed boats is enormous in the UK. Different parts of the world you have different things, but we have dozens and dozens and dozens of single-handed classes. And I thought that's a fair argument. And what we decided is that I should lash up a prototype, because I'd explained to him the numbers I'd crunched and how I'd arrived at what I felt the boat should be. And as it turned out, as the development went on, Paul, as it happens, has his own spreadsheet of numbers and things, so that he's got a reference point when he's designing a boat of what matters and what effects things have. But we decided we'd lash something up to get a sense of the proportions of this boat and find out what mattered and what didn't matter. And ironically, well, as it happened, when we had this conversation about, we had a lot of it, as it turned out, when I checked back, we had over 200 emails and they were the only ones I kept because they were pertinent. There was a lot of other emails that were just chat type ones, trying to discuss as the design went on about what mattered and what didn't matter, and lots of phone calls and stuff. But all our conversations started with a laser, because a laser's the most popular dinghy. It's got that kind of anyone can sail it thing that I was interested in. So we'd keep referring back to a laser. So we decided I'd lash something up around a laser to see what would be involved in making a laser tick all the boxes that we were trying to tick. And as it happened, I had a laser in the garden, only an old one. So I set about making some racks for it. I'd already decided the boat needed to have racks or a flared hull or some way of getting the crew further out. And any boat that the crew sits effectively in the boat, like a laser or a fin, when the wind strength is up, if you're not hiking hard, you just don't go anywhere. Whereas in a blaze with the racks, it still pays to hike hard. The harder you hike, the faster you go. But if you just sit there because you're knackered, or you're not particularly fit, or you don't even, maybe you're just going for a cruise and you don't want to work that hard, you still truck along because your body weight is still a fair way out from the centre of the boat. So that was one of the things I needed. So my mocked up laser, first thing I did was build some racks. It happened to be an old laser boom that had broken, which I cut in half, and some 3/4 inch ply kind of hooked into the cockpit. So that dealt with the rack thing. I'd already decided it needed to have a spinnaker. You could put a conventional spinnaker on a single-handed boat, but that would just be hard work, wouldn't it, getting the pole in and out and stuff. So it really wanted to be asymmetric. So I lashed together an asymmetric pole that used, again, I think it was an RS Terra mast or something that was lashed to the deck. I got an RS Fever spinnaker, borrowed it from Wilsonian Sailing Club, one of the club boats, to try. We used an old drawstring bag from Tesco's or something as a spinnaker bag, put it all together in this laser, and went for a sail, and it worked. And the good thing about it was, especially because the laser wasn't me, I did all this without drilling any holes or making any permanent fixes to this laser. When it came off, it was just a standard laser again, which I was quite chuffed with. Anyway, the boat worked well. And we did learn a lot from it. When Paul first said about making a mock-up, I thought, why do I want to do that? Because I know what I want. But actually, there was a lot came out of it. Some of it obvious in hindsight, and some of it not so obvious. So to start with, the majority of single-handed boats tend to have an unstayed mast, like a laser, a tube stuck in a hole. When you put a spinnaker on a boat, that's now putting a force on that mast that isn't normally there, and the mast bends forward, the sail fills up, you get the mainsail changes shape effectively. So it became very obvious quite quickly that you need stays on a boat with a spinnaker. The next thing is the laser's got quite a small cockpit, which is quite good, because when you come up from a capsize, there's not much water in it. It can get away. It doesn't even necessarily get water in it because it floats higher in the water. But when you put a spinnaker on a boat, a laser main sheet's quite long anyway because of the way it comes off the end of the boom. Now you've got a halyard for the spinnaker, you've got sheets for the spinnaker, plus all the other sailing controls. The cockpit became just a mass of rope. And when that cockpit filled up with water, it's a massive rope all floating around getting tangled up. It was a nightmare. And I say for the water, you're going to say, well, don't capsize in. But the next thing I learned is now this laser is going much faster than the laser normally goes. And it's got racks on it. And what was happening is the spray, the bow wave and the spray that was coming off the front of the boat was rolling around the curved side of the boat, hitting the racks and getting shot into like the helm's face stroke the cockpit. So the boat was constantly filling up with water because of the way the spray was coming off. So clearly how we handled the spray as it separated from the hull was going to be important. Again, in something like a Musto skiff and the RS100, things were a trapeze, they tend to be open boats anyway, so the water washes out. But of course anything that's flying up off the hull doesn't bother you because it's only your feet that are next to the hull. When you're actually sitting on the hull, that spray's hitting you in the face, so it becomes a different priority. A very obvious thing to learn was that bagging a spinnaker on a single-handed boat doesn't work. You haven't got enough hands to hold the tiller, control the sails, pull the spinnaker down and stuff it in the bag. It needed to have a chute. I think we kind of knew that anyway, but obviously a chute was a lot more to put together on a mocked-up dinghy. So anyway, the final thing we learned was that as much as I want racks actually were a bit of a pain. When you're on the Blaze, they got a trampoline on them on the Blaze, and I didn't have a trampoline, so that would have helped. But you need to be able to slide yourself in and out in various different wind strengths, or when you get a lull in the wind or whatever, you need to be able to slide in there. And on a single sail boat, you can put the main and the tiller in one hand and you can move yourself around quite easy. In fact, you do it without even thinking about it. You don't even, even if you're just controlling the main or you've got something in both hands, you can still use those arms to do something. As soon as you throw a spinnaker into that mix, it all gets a lot more complicated. You've now got two ropes to control, and moving in and out of the boat on and off this racks wasn't ideal. I think it would have worked with racks with a tight trampoline, but not having the gap and being able to slide in and out would have been a lot easier. Which brings me to the final thing, is that anyone who's sailed a laser will tell you that, especially if you hike it hard, it's not a very comfortable boat. There's lots of people that will give you stories about how they buggered their knees up from sailing lasers. And this laser with the racks was actually slightly more comfortable in a way, but racks are never comfortable. You're just sitting on a round tube. And it made me realise that when you start designing a boat from scratch and you can choose the things that matter, making a boat that was comfortable would be another thing that would be really good. And since we had a free hand in what this was going to look like, making it comfortable should be on the agenda. Right, so from this we could now start to narrow down what it is that we're aiming at. As I'd already been saying, I'm not looking for the sailing elite here. We were targeting just a club sailor, and we were also targeting a hiking boat, and we kind of fixed on the sort of basic hull dimensions and the width we were going for, and that kind of led to a few things. To start with, this wasn't going to be a super fast boat. It was clearly going to be fairly quick. And one thing I kept stressing to Paul is that I didn't really care how fast this boat was, because the speed would just come out of the decisions we made. But what I did want is it to feel fast. One of the drawbacks for sailing a trapeze boat, especially until you get very good, is that you're distant from the boat, because obviously it's only your feet touching the boat, and you tend to be higher up for the water, so you don't get the spray, which, as we've already spoken about, isn't necessarily a bad thing. But you don't get the spray and you don't get the closest to the water, which are two things that really make you feel you're going fast. If you're in a laser, which isn't that fast, and you're hiking hard, your bum is probably in the water. If not, it's just, millimetres above it. Your head's not much more, you've got spray in your face, you might only be going 6 or 7 knots, but it feels like 1,000,000 miles an hour. Whereas if you sail a 49er, which will comfortably do 20 knots, but your head's 3 foot above the water and it's kissing the water and gliding along and there's no spray, you know you're going fast, but you don't get the same sensations of fast. And I was much more interested in the sailing sensation than I was the absolute speed. As I said, if we put 20 square metres of sail on this thing, it was going to go quick, whether we wanted it or not. But that wasn't the idea. I wanted the right amount of sail to make the boat comfortable to sail for the club sailor, but the sensation of being fast to be there. Anyway, getting back to my point. We've now broadly speaking defined the boat we want, and we know it's not going to be super quick, it's not going to be slow, but that means it's going to spend a fair amount of its time in displacement sailing mode. You know, it's not going to be a planing upwind and downwind, it's not going to be a apparent wind boat. Musto's skiff, going back to it, is all optimised around going fast. It's a very flat skiff-like hull. And that's because it does go fast. It planes upwind and downwind. And what they basically say is when the wind's too light for you to go fast, well then you just suck it up and you deal with the boat. You trim the boat as best you can to deal with that. We were kind of the opposite. We needed to make the boat want to plane and be a fast boat, but at the end of the day, we were going to optimise it around or closer to its sub-planing conditions. So it's going to have a slightly more rounded hull. That would reduce the wetted area. It would make it nicer to tack. One of the things I again stressed to Paul, which would define the sort of shape of the hull, is that one of the things with a Musto skiff is it's quite tippy. It's quite narrow at the waterline, but of course you are stood up, so you can move around on that to find the point you want to be at. What I didn't want was a super skinny optimised boat like a Moth or an RS100 or something that is very narrow at the waterline, because you were of course going to have to sail this boat some of the time without your hands in control, because when you're pulling the spinnaker up and down, your hands are all dealing with the spinnaker. Yeah, you're letting the boat steer itself, or you might be steering it with your leg over the top of the tiller or something. You needed a boat that was basically stable, so that your average club sailor wasn't put off with putting the boat up and down. So that kind of already then defined the width we wanted the wetted part of the hull to be. Again, because this is now going to be used probably club sailors, it might often be used, and in the UK certainly, a lot of our sailing is done inland on lakes and so forth. You're going to be tacking it. So again, we wanted something that tacked nicely. So that meant you'd have to have a little bit of rocker in it, give the ends a chance to swap round. It all detracted from the absolute speed of the boat, but it would lead to a boat that was nicer to sail. Anyway, let me wrap this up here, because this is going to go on forever, and we haven't even got to designing the boat yet, have we? Thanks for watching. I'm Ian. This is driving to work with the Foxwell family. But I'll do another film and we'll continue the story about my part in the RS100 next time. Thanks for watching.